Hello, folks. Now, we do have some very interesting news today. Now, there's been a lot of tension between China and India. Now, lots of the news services aren't covering the story much, but basically, folks, there is a massive border dispute that is happening. And what is happening basically is that the Chinese government is claiming that this territory that India is occupying, the Indian military is occupying, belongs to China. Now, in response to this, the Indian government has sent its military forces to bolster this territory and to fortify it. And in response to this action by the Indian government, the Chinese government has sent soldiers out to this region. Now, it's quite a mountainous region, which means that the normally sophisticated Chinese tanks and light armored vehicles are unable to be very effective. So in response to this, the Chinese government has pumped millions of dollars into its Defense Development Technology Center, and this center and others like it have been working to increase the military hardware that the Chinese government has available. Now, one such piece of hardware is a tank, a new light tank. Now, this tank is very special because it is a mountain-going tank. Now, this is a very advanced piece of technology because basically this tank has to put up with the stresses and the high demands of operating in a mountainous region where supplies are often quite far away, because if this tank breaks down, it is likely going to be far away from a place where it can get repaired. So what's happening, folks, is that this tank is an upgrade of the ZTQ 105 tank, which has entered trials in a Tibetan plateau. Now, the Chinese newspaper that released this press statement has said that, quote, a show of force designed to deter the Indian military. So basically, folks, these newspapers that released this press statement, these are government-operated newspapers, and it's quite interesting that the quote they're saying basically that the tank is a show of force designed to deter the Indian military. Now, this is obviously a pissing contest between the Indian military, who has also been developing similar technologies, but the Chinese military, they do have quite an advantage in their technology compared to the Indian side. Now, according to a defense writer, Robert Beckhuizen, he observed that after spending time in New Delhi, the capital of India, I believe, that the light tank is surely a counterpart to the Indian tank, which has been developed to also operate in this terrain. Now, folks, it's quite interesting that these two countries are spending a lot of money to develop quite a niche tank, because this tank is very niche. It operates in mountainous terrain. Now, if this tank was to operate in a more flat terrain, it would be quite useless compared to the other tanks. So the fact that we have these militaries and they're pumping in lots of money into a very specialized, very niche tank, it suggests that they're gearing towards a possible conflict and that they're developing their military technology in order to counter the threat that they see the other side is posing. Now, light tanks have actually fallen out of favor quite a lot back since World War II. In World War II, they used a lot of tanks. The Western, or the Allies, and the Axis, they both used quite a lot of light tanks, but tanks are becoming increasingly irrelevant in modern warfare with the air superiority that has been basically in high demand. Now, if we look back to Iraq, when the US invaded Iraq, the Iraqi army had a massive number of tanks. Now, these were old Soviet-style tanks, and when the US came in, they utterly decimated these tanks with their air support and the more modern American tanks. So basically, it's very interesting that tanks are still gaining relevance, I guess, in 2017, because air support is making these tanks increasingly weak, because these tanks are unable to hide against the technology that these air support units are deploying. So folks, I have this news article here that I printed out, and it goes into a lot more detail about this tank, which is designed to operate at higher altitudes where the thinner air starves the engines of heavier vehicles. Now, this goes back to the point I made earlier that it's a very niche vehicle because heavier vehicles, heavier tanks, when they go into these high altitude locations, their engines are unable to operate because the air starves out the engine basically. Now, the light tank's primary weapon is a fully stabilized 105mm gun with 38 rounds of ammunition. So folks, what do you think about this development? It's quite interesting, and I'm going to be following this story to bring you guys updates about the situation with these border disputes between China and India.